What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more new iOS 18.4 features and changes. We're going to talk about a potential bad change for Apple Maps, an update on the upcoming MacBooks and iPhone 17, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and check out the Apple Den newsletter. Okay, so this week we saw something very rare, and that is a beta release on a Friday. So yes, on Friday, aka yesterday, we saw iOS 18.4 Beta 1 get released along with all the other Beta 1 software updates from Apple. So very rare situation, but 18.4 in general is not a typical update. There's been a lot of delays and weird things going on with this software updates. Now, I did make a video on Beta 1. If you missed that, I did cover all the features and changes I found after going through it the first time. However, in this video, I want to talk about some additional changes and of course, a lot more Apple news as well. So one of the first things I noticed, after going through this tonight is inside of the Photos application. So if you go into Photos and then go into Albums right here, and then you tap on the three dots up in the top right, we have a new UI here. So it now shows List View and Keep Photo, and you can see that you can sort by date modified, name, and custom order, and you can also filter by albums and folders. So this UI here is different and it's much better now. It's easier to understand here in 18.4 compared to 18.3 and previous versions. Now, a nice new change that we got in iOS 18.4 Beta 1 is if you go into your settings and go to notifications and then go down here to prioritize notifications. This is a feature we've known about since WWDC last year, and we've been waiting on this for a while. So we can now have Apple Intelligence prioritize our notifications. And I was finally able to get this to work. If you watched my What's New video, you would know that I was not able to get it to work right away. But you can see I did get this to work here, and it shows up as a priority notification with the Apple Intelligence logo to the left, and you have this little glow right there. So if you get multiple notifications, but Apple Intelligence deems a notification or notifications to be important, it will separate those as a priority notification as long as you have this enabled, which I think is awesome. I think most people should go ahead and enable this. That way your important notifications don't get lost with all the others. Now, speaking of notifications, we also have a slight change to the notification center animation. So for some reason, it just feels a lot smoother than it did in iOS 18.3. It just feels more fluid than it did in 18.3. So just a minor thing I noticed. And then we also have a change to the privacy indicator dots up in the dynamic island. So they now go to the right when you have two live activities going at the same time, and one of them is using, the microphone or location or something like that. You will see that dot go over to the right of the dynamic island now, and it has a little black outline behind it. There's also a new pop-up when you invoke double tap. So if I double tap the back of my phone, you can see that we get this up here. So it says back tap, and it does tell you that double tap has been detected. So I don't know that I like the design of that pop-up there. It looks kind of, I don't know, it just looks weird, but that is something new here in 18.4 to signify that you actually did back tap without something just happening randomly. That way you don't think that something just happened randomly. You get reminded that it was back tap that caused that action. We also have some new podcast widgets in iOS 18.4 Beta 1. So if you go over here, we had Up Next before, but now we have a library widget. So you could add these sizes for your library and also for shows. So if you want to add a show or something from your library, you can go ahead and do that right there. And that's what here's what this one looks like on the home screen. Now, if we head back into our settings and go down to the apps section and then go to default apps up top, you can see that we do have a slight change here as well with translation. So you can now change the default translate app if you have another translation app installed on your device. And if you're in the EU, you will have another section here to change your default Maps application. So if you want your Maps app to be something different to navigate, you can change that as well, but that's not here for the US. So something I covered in my initial What's New video is that the cellular toggle here in your control center will actually change in real time based on your cell connectivity. So if you don't have full bars, it will show that you only have a couple of bars instead of always showing full. As you can see there, it just went down. However, I found out that this also applies to Wi-Fi. So if your Wi-Fi only has 1 or 2 bars, it will now show that in the little glyph icon here in real time in your control center, which which is awesome. It's a really small thing, but it is pretty awesome. In the wallet application, we now have support for Japanese My Number cards. So the digital IDs, you can add those, and more than 100 million Japanese residents apparently use the My Number card ID. So it's really big over there, and that is now compatible. You can now add that with 18.4 beta 1. Now, of course, one of the big changes in iOS 18.4 beta 1 is the addition of these ambient sounds. If you go to the plus right here in the control center and you scroll down, we do have our ambient music, which if you start playing that, so I'll just do sleep right here. For example, a lot of people are wondering, does this require Apple Music? And no, it does not. So if we press right here, you can see what song it is. It's also not AI generated music. Some people are asking if it's just AI music. That is not the case. And you can see that if you actually tap on that to go into the player, you can see it all right here. You can go to the next song, previous, pause, all that. And if you go into the, app switcher here, you can see that the name of the app is Ambient Music. So it's not going to interfere with your Apple Music algorithm or anything like that. And you don't even need an account, like I said. So this is just its own little standalone thing, but it does kind of rely on, the music in Apple Music. Also, if you double tap to type to Siri down here and you ask a question, so I'll just say, what's the weather, for example, and you go ahead and tap on send, take a look at the little arrow pointing up right there because we have a new animation. It doesn't last long, but we have a new animation when it's sending and thinking about the answer for that question, which is pretty neat. But as far as the other Siri features, those are missing here with iOS 18.4 beta 1. And as we heard earlier, those features are going to be delayed until iOS 18.5. So things like, where Siri can see what's on your screen, on-screen awareness, along with personal context, and some of the other features that we were expecting originally in 18.4 beta 1 or in 18.4 in general. Again, according to Mark Gurman, those have been delayed until iOS 18.5. So we could see something throughout the beta stages, but so far in beta 1, we don't see anything related to the new Siri. Now, we also did not see the new emoji in iOS 18.4 beta 1, but that's expected. We rarely see the new emoji in the first beta of these 0.4 updates, so I would expect the new emoji to come in a future beta update for 18.4. But again, like I've said before, I think that Genmoji has basically ruined the hype, I guess, for new emojis, at least for me and for a lot of people I talk to. A lot of the ones you can create with Genmoji are awesome, but of course the new emoji will allow us to create more variety for our Genmoji. We can build off of those new emoji as well. So we should see that in a future beta update. Also, the Vision Pro application is going to be coming in a later iOS 18.4 beta update. That is not available here in beta 1. That, of course, is going to be kind of like a companion app, just like for the watch, for your Apple Watch, you'll have a Vision Pro app to kind of manage your Apple Vision Pro. Now, we also need to talk about the controversial news surrounding Apple Maps, because we're hearing now from Mark Gurman that ads are going to be coming to Apple Maps. And if that sounds familiar, that's because we heard this years ago, back in 2022, but nothing ever happened with it. But it appears that Apple is still planning to do this. It's probably not going to happen anytime super soon, but we're hearing that we might start seeing ads in Apple Maps. Now, a lot of people got super upset when they heard this because they thought that we would just see random banner ads or pop-up ads just popping up all over the place like on a website. That's not really how this is going to work. It's going to be paid ads for things like, restaurants wanting to be at the top when you search for best, chicken nearby. They're going to show up at the top, things like that. It's going to be very similar to what we already see in the App Store, which is a first-party application. Like when I search for chatbot, you can see we have an ad right there up top, which, obviously this company is paying for that ad space, which of course is making Apple money, and it doesn't really ruin the experience, at least not in my opinion. So I would expect something similar for Apple Maps. Again, this is not going to happen probably in 18.4 or 18.5, but maybe in the future. Now, I also wanted to briefly cover this Reddit thread that I found that I thought you guys might find pretty interesting as well. So this is something I did not realize, but every iPhone 16 model has a wallpaper that is inspired by the number of camera lenses that it has. So the 16E has just this one circle right here, whereas the others have 2 and 3 circles to signify the number of cameras on that device. So seems obvious, but I guess nobody ever pointed this out, and that's just, I don't know, it's pretty cool to see. I mean, it's just super Apple, a super small detail, kind of a real subtle thing, but I think it's pretty cool and I thought you guys would enjoy that as well. And by the way, if you want to download that iPhone 16e wallpaper, I will leave that link down in the description below. Okay, so now let's talk about the performance and the battery life with iOS 18.4 Beta 1. So we scored a 3593 on the single core and a staggering 9101 on the multi-core. I don't think I've ever had over 9,000 on the multi-core score here on my 16 Pro Max. So iOS 18.4 Beta 1 is scoring extremely high in the Geekbench scores. Now, again, that doesn't always translate. Just to show you an example, by the way, a comparison of the previous ones you can see there. Again, Geekbench scores do not necessarily directly equate to overall better performance. They are correlated in some way, but it's not like a direct, it's just going to be like super fast, faster than anything you've ever had before. It's not like that. So I still do notice, like I said in my What's New video, that the image playground is very buggy. Genmoji is still very buggy, but aside from the Apple Intelligence features, it does feel fine. There's really not too many issues that I've noticed, and it also does not get as hot as I was expecting, and kind of like it was when I first installed it, which was expected. It was downloading the new Apple Intelligence models, but so far, after it cooled down and I used it for a while, it's not very bad. And then as far as battery life goes, battery life is actually doing pretty good so far when I'm recording this video right here, but overall, I would not expect it to be as good as 18.3.1 or iOS 18.3, at least not in Beta 1. Hopefully, as these betas go on, we will see some improvements to that battery life, which I would expect. Okay, so let's talk about what to expect next from Apple, because I think next week is going to be a very quiet week. So next week is the final week of February, and I would not expect any type of software updates next week. So at least not for iOS. Now, I do think that we're going to see Beta 2 of iOS 18.4 either on the week of March 3rd or on the week of March 10th. So it just depends, because Apple did release Beta 1 on a Friday, and they're probably not going to release another beta on a Friday again. So that puts us in a weird spot. So I would say either the week of the 3rd or the week of the 10th. If I had to guess one, I would say the week of the 10th is more likely, but of course we will have to wait and see. And of course the final release will be at some point in April. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. Now this week, Apple did announce the new iPhone 16e. So if you missed my video talking everything about the iPhone 16e and how it compares to the iPhone 16, I'll leave that link down below and also up in the cards above. I did also write about it over on the Apple Den and why I think it's actually a good phone at a good price. I know it's controversial, but I think it is the right price. I wrote about that over there if you want to check that out. Now, that was the only thing that we saw released this week. A lot of people thought we would see a new MacBook, a new iPad, a new, whatever, AirTag, so many things, but that was the only product that Apple released this week. However, we're now hearing that we should be seeing the M4 MacBook Air by March at the latest. So this news comes from Mark Gurman, and he's saying that the MacBook Air, the 13-inch and the 15-inch MacBook Air with the M4 chip, is going to launch very soon. So we could actually see that as early as next week, since he did say March at the latest. So there is a possibility of seeing the new M4 MacBook Air get announced next week, which would be pretty awesome. And that would, make me eat my words about next week not being an important week, at least for software, because we would at least have hardware announcements, which would make up for it. So we should be seeing that. And that, of course, is going to be a great buy for anybody in the market for a new MacBook Air. But as far as the MacBook Pro goes, that's coming later this year. And you remember how last year the iPad Pro was the first device to get the M4 chip before any Mac? Well, this year that is not going to happen, it looks like, at least according to Mark Gurman. So he says that the MacBook Pro is going to get the M5 chip first later this year in the fall, and the M5 iPad Pro is going to launch in the first half of next year in 2026. Now, of course, this MacBook is not going to be the OLED MacBook. We are expecting that potentially in 2026. This is just going to be more of a spec bump with that M5 chip. And speaking of internals, we also heard this week that Apple is already working on the C2 modem for the iPhone. So of course, the C1 modem is Apple's in-house 5G modem for the iPhone 16e, which that will launch in other phones later on down the road, but right now it's only in the 16e, and it looks like Apple is already working on the C2 modem. But let's talk about the iPhone 17 coming later this year, because we have a lot of rumors about that. A lot of big changes could be coming later this year to the iPhone. I think the iPhone 16e was just the tip of the iceberg. Like that was just the smallest change we're going to get this year when it comes to iPhones, because we're now hearing that the iPhone design is apparently going to, quote, change significantly this year, at least according to this Weibo leaker. So in this post by Digital Chat Station, he says that the iPhone design is starting to change significantly. He says that the iPhone 17 Air features a horizontal bar-shaped design on the rear, and the Pro models will have a large horizontal matrix design. So we might actually be seeing some fundamental design changes to the iPhone, which we've not really seen in quite some time, especially to the camera bump. Just the overall aesthetic and design of the camera bump has been the same for a while. So if we actually saw a change to that, that would be pretty significant. And we're also hearing that the design overall, the build quality might be different as well, because according to an investor note that was obtained by Mac Rumors, the iPhone 17 Pros are going to feature aluminum as the frame material instead of titanium like we saw before. And also Apple supply chain analyst Jeff Poo says that the iPhone 17s will all have aluminum frames, but he expects the iPhone 17 Air to have a titanium frame. So really weird how that would be the one with titanium, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. And what do you guys prefer? Do you like aluminum, or do you prefer the titanium borders on your iPhone as far as the build quality? And also, according to that same investor note that Mac Rumor saw, the iPhone 17 lineup will support 35-watt charging speed. So we might see a minor bump in the charging speeds for the iPhone when it comes to wired charging. And then as far as the internals of the iPhone 17, it's looking like all iPhone 17 models will adopt the new Apple in-house Wi-Fi chip. So this comes from Ming-Chi Kuo, and he says that Broadcom's Wi-Fi chips will also be replaced by Apple's in-house chips at a faster pace. And he says that his latest survey shows that the iPhone 17 models will feature Apple's in-house Wi-Fi chips versus only the slim iPhone 17, which will adopt the C1 modem chip. And he says that beyond the cost reduction for Apple, the switch to in-house Wi-Fi chips will enhance connectivity across Apple devices. So it's really cool to see this happening right now, because we've been talking about this for so long. To actually see the C1 modem in the iPhone 16e and now to see the in-house Wi-Fi chip, Apple is just really working to get everything in-house, everything done in-house, which is obviously their end goal, every company's end goal, but it's just cool to see. So I'm really curious to see how that Wi-Fi chip is going to work compared to previous models. So we also need to talk about the big news regarding the UK government and Apple, because a couple weeks ago, the UK government demanded Apple to create a backdoor to allow government to view encrypted user data globally, which obviously is a big ask that Apple was never going to comply with. And indeed, Apple did deny creating that backdoor, and instead they pulled the end-to-end encryption feature for iCloud storage, which of course is called Advanced Data Protection in your settings. So that is now eliminated in the UK. And this is good news for everybody except for the UK, because obviously it's going to keep your device, as secure as possible with end-to-end encryption. But for those in the UK, this is pretty bad news, because removing advanced data protection means that user files will be accessible to Apple and can be shared with law enforcement as long as they have a warrant. So I think Apple did the right thing here by, basically sacrificing the UK to protect everybody else's encrypted data worldwide. But this is a big story here, and this has a lot of opinions. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a woman in Australia noticed that her car was missing one morning and thought that somebody was just playing a prank on her. But this was not a prank. Her car was stolen out of her driveway overnight. So she panicked and she called her friend, asking her where her car was, like she would know. And thank goodness for that friend, because she asked the most important question, which was, do you have anything inside the car like AirPods? And it just so happens that the woman did have a pair of AirPods in the car. So she was able to pull up the location in her Find My app, and the two friends sped off to the location of the car to see if they could get it back. But once they located the stolen car, they saw that a woman and a man were inside of that stolen car. So the victim called police and told them the location of where this was going on. So once the police arrived, they did notice that the stolen car was in a crash just before the woman and her friend arrived at the location after tracking it. But, the police were able to go in there and find and arrest the thieves, who were a 26-year-old man and a 17-year-old girl. But once again, like I always say, without the AirTags or the AirPods in this case, this would not have been solved as quickly. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's Apple Weekly episode. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.